So good evening again, y'all. My name is Carlos. I am co-facilitator in our community outreach program. And I want to welcome everyone to our Free Minds on the same page, right night, which is a mutual exchange of hope and healing between incarcerated poets and the community. Our featured poet ambassadors tonight are Free Minds member Mustafa and Woodrow, in conversation with my co-host, Araba. And we thank you all for joining us in our Right Night. And I want to extend a warm welcome to our returning night writers and to any new volunteers that are here for the first time tonight. We also have Free Minds members who are home in the community joining us. Please post in the chat where you're joining us from, and if this is your first time at Right Night, or if you've attended before with Free Minds. Also, before you leave a comment, make sure that you click everyone in the chat box. That way we all get to see your messages. Our incarcerated poets would be thrilled to know how many community members are supporting them with this, with what cities and states are here to represent. Here's how it will go tonight. We will have a conversation with Mustafa and Woodrow, and we will have a chance to answer any of your questions until about 7:25. Please put any questions you have in the chat or use the Q&A button below at any time. There will be then we will share some quick tips on how to use the platform Miro and give some poetry feedback. And we will all join on the same page. Now we'll turn it over to Araba, who will introduce us, Mustafa and Woodrow. Araba?
Thanks, Carlos. Hi, everyone. My name is Araba Dennis. I started out working with Free Minds as an intern, and now I'm a program specialist and jail book club facilitator for the book clubs that we hold at the DC jail. I just want to formally introduce both of our guests tonight, Mustafa Plummer and Woodrow Wilson. I'll start with Mustafa. Michael Mustafa Plummer spent 23 years incarcerated for offenses that occurred when he was a teenager. In 2020, Mustafa was released under the Incarceration Reduction Amendment Act, or IRA. This month marks 3 years since his release. Mustafa has committed his life's work to advocate for and serve youth in DC. Mustafa is the lead credible messenger in the youth division for the East of the River Clergy Police Community Partnership, or ERC-PCP. Mustafa triages the issues that youth face and meets them where they are, whether that be at home or in secure facilities, group homes, or other settings. In addition, Mustafa works with Safe Passage and serves as a site supervisor with Clean Decisions, Inner City Family Services, and the National Association for the Advancement of Returning Citizens, or NAARC. He lives his mission understanding that compassion for young people, their households, and their communities will allow them to thrive. As for our other guest, Woodrow Wilson, Woodrow came home in December of 2021 after serving 29 years and 4 months in prison. He dedicates his time to being with his family, working to apply the skills he learned in prison to build his future at home, and looking for ways to help particularly the youth. While incarcerated, Woodrow worked in the manufacturing and shipping of textiles for 10 years. First, he sewed, and later he distributed Army uniforms. Woodrow applies his professional skill and experience in his current job in logistics and supply at Target. He also works alongside his father to run and develop their residential landscaping business. Woodrow loves to exercise and to work on his book, which is a decade in the making. Yesterday, he made the most of his time by getting to the tidal basin to see the DC cherry blossoms for the first time since he was a child. Carlos, I know you're excited to talk with Mustafa since you met each other at an important point in both of your lives, so I'll turn it over to you to facilitate that conversation.
Thank you, Araba. Thank you for the introduction of these two great men. And yeah, for sure, me and Mustafa, we was one of those moments where we was growing up, trying to become better men while surviving prison. And Mustafa, one of those things that helped you, and I know this for sure because it's one of those things that like stuck out and I admire about you, is that was like how dedicated you were to education and your discipline to remain in that path of learning. Can you tell us why education was so important to you?
It goes a little deep. I'm gonna give you a brief synopsis of it. I always promised my grandmother before she passed that I would finish school. And even though I was incarcerated, I still wanted to do that. So I earned my GED. And when I was on the juvenile block, I had wrote my girlfriend at the time a letter, and I proofread the letter, and I seen it wasn't legible. So that encouraged me to, want to learn more and to advance my vocabulary. And so, I read my first book, Nathan McCall, Make You Want to Holler. And from there, my thirst for knowledge just grew, just from reading everything I can get my hands on.
And that's definitely, like I said, this is one of those things that has always stuck out to me, right? And my other question is like pursuing that path or staying on that path of learning and like pursuing education. Like, how did that help you today in your reentry?
Oh, I mean, it was monumental in the sense that it helped with social capital, with staff members of the Federal Bureau of Prisons writing letters for my release. From being a tutor in prison, being a religious leader and so forth. That opened up so many doors, and that come from reading, expanding the mind, and wanting to learn, even though I was in a situation where I had life in prison. I didn't want to die or be in the same state as I was when I entered prison, in the state of ignorance.
That's big. And thank you for sharing that with us too. You chose a poem to read to us, right? And it's
Right.
written by one of our members that's incarcerated.
Right.
Would you like to read that poem for us?
Yes, sir. So the poem is called My Reality by Seth A. Whether you walk or drive, you will see the stadium, the armory, the shelter, the jail, and the cemetery. I was looking out the window of the jail at the Massachusetts Avenue. And what did I see? The stadium, the armory, the shelter, jail, and the cemetery. No matter what you set your claim, you live in the stadium, the armory, the shelter, the jail, and the cemetery. I moved to Kansas City to fly like an eagle, but I still saw the stadium, the armory, the shelter, the jail, and the cemetery. Then I started to realize that it's a grind where they send all of our kids to the stadium, the armory, the shelter, the jail, and the cemetery. I keep my head down and my mind racing, so busy that running around town, you don't notice the stadium, the armory, the shelter, the jail, and the cemetery. Well, we have been doing this for so long that we normalize it. Which one will you settle in? The stadium, the armory, the shelter, the jail, or the cemetery?
Thank you, Mustafa. And it's crazy when I read this poem before, right? And the thing about it, like I made a connection myself because I remember like I was looking out the window one time at CTF, and then I remember looking at the cemetery and remember my grandmother's words, like when I used to be on that dumb stuff, and she was like, "You either gonna end up in jail or in the cemetery." Tell me, how did you connect to this poem?
In so many ways. I was in CTF, and if you look out the window, that's what you see. CTF is a facility where you can actually see the outside, where the windows aren't shaded from the outside. That's exactly what you look at the cemetery. And you saw the question: do you want your life to end like this in a cemetery from this place? And it resonates in so many areas. As you see the shelter, when you go to court, as you see the armory, when you go to court or you go to medical, you look and say, man, you don't want your life to end like this. And that enthuses you more to be released from that captivity.
Yeah, I'm also curious, right? Because you got like this long list of accomplishments in your bio, right? That like Araba just read. Like, how does your like education, your path in education, how does that relate with your work that you do with the youth as a credible messenger and as with the Safe Passage program?
Well, I give all praise due to God. Without God, there would be no me. And then social capital. And then, being studious in prison, taking classes, reading, writing, and being active in the prison setting, but the community setting, not just being closed into a race, African American. I reached out to all races. I dealt with all races. I actually went to workshops that dealt with resumes and taking interviews that prepared me for when I came into society. It's relatable to my work with the youth and with returning citizens because I've been there before. I was away with youth, just as involved, and I knew that if I had an opportunity to come home, that I would be involved in my community. And I give my story, but that's not enough, because they have a story, and you can't belittle their story because of their age. But the important factor that I try to hammer in is where I'm at now. After all this time I spent 23 years in prison, that wasn't my end. That doesn't define me as a human being, and that change is real and the redemption is real.
Man, that's well said, Mustafa, man. I like how you said that because, you speak for all of us when you say, like, at the end of the day, we're still human beings. You also got another poem by a juvenile in our book club. You want to read that for us?
Yes, sir. The Decision by CM. The biggest actions, early age, just me and my friends, me versus them, antisocial behaviors or good behaviors. It's up to me. Peer pressure ain't an option. The best thing to do is self-evaluate yourself before you do anything. Control your life, feeling like a boss.
How do you relate to this poem?
Peer pressure. You think about life as a youth and being in the streets with everybody doing, right? And so you got to make that decision whether you're going to fall under peer pressure or whether you're going to analyze yourself and say, this is not right for me or this is good for me. Because that split decision section can cost you your life, whether it's your life physically or whether it's you being placed behind bars. And so this resonates so well today because so many people want to be accepted by social media or by their peers, right? But in all actuality, the true leader stands out by itself against all odds.
Man, thank you, Mustafa. It's definitely it's a joy to be out here with you in freedom. Keep doing what you're doing. And again, just thank you. Now I'm gonna just give it back to my co-host, Araba, who will ask Woodrow a few questions.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Carlos. So it's been really great to hear a little bit of Woodrow's story in preparing for this Write Night. Woodrow, you've had a pretty unique approach to writing that I'd love for our audience to hear more about. You've been working on a book for years, which we talked about in your bio, and tonight you're going to read your poem, Never Quite Enough, that has a story about your writing process that I wouldn't have imagined from reading the poem. Could you share a little bit about your experience writing the poem?
Yes, during my incarceration, at different times, the different feelings within the lines of the poem kind of hit me, and I'd add them kind of mentally, mostly, right? Because believe it or not, like, I didn't write the poem down per se on a paper first. I kind of just kept it in my head, maybe line by line, and I'd always come back to it, add something to it, depending on whatever I was going through at the time, whether I be locked down somewhere or, just going through something, feelings about home, feelings about my release. So I just add, a line here, then add another line. So kind of each and every line of it is it's different, what I'm saying, a poem in and of itself.
It's very creative. Would you like to share the poem with us?
Yes, I would. Thank you. It's called Never Quite Enough. People ask me what it was like being 30 years in prison. I tell them it was always cold. I could never get warm enough. It was so loud, I could never find peace and quiet. It was so dirty, I could never get clean enough. It was so crowded, I could never find enough space. I wanted to hire a lawyer to buy my way out, but I never had enough money. I prayed to God to move the legislators to release me, and to my surprise, the parole board told me, you've got just enough time, man, to be released. So my answer to those who ask how I made it, I say, I made it by just enough.
Thank you so much. That was very powerful. I think all of the different lines that say what you couldn't get enough of are a great way of illustrating how all the different obstacles that prison presented for you at every turn until suddenly the obstacles were gone, almost miraculously. Writing has also played a key role in your connections with your family. You mentioned having a really strong relationship with both of your parents, and I'm wondering how writing helped you stay connected with them over the years.
Yes, in particular, my father, he's always kind of, been a writer. Uh, I always call him kind of my first scholar, you know what I mean? The first scholar I ever met. He, like he can take a book and like he'll write it and he'll like add his piece to it. I'm talking about like these are like educational books, medical books. Like, and he'd send me letters and like, how to perform surgery on a torn meniscus. And he'd like write that and kind of, you'd never know that like this is from a medical book. This you believe that like a doctor was really writing you and like giving you the insight on how to perform the surgery. And like that was his way of instead of just writing me like with the sorrows of home and missing me and so on and so forth, we'd keep in touch that way. And whether it be politics or medical, whatever book he had, he has like an extensive library. So that was our way of kind of staying connected. And throughout my incarceration, I could always count on a letter from him from home.
Mm-hmm. You're touching on this as you talk, but the correspondence between you and your father seems pretty special. A lot of Free Minds members don't have outside support from family or from friends. Why is it important, in your opinion, to have correspondence from outside when people are incarcerated? And is it common to lose touch with friends and family on the outside when incarcerated?
For certain, for sure. You go through all of I call prison like going through phases, right? The beginning phases where, all of the unknowns and the fear and everything like that. And then the next phase where you kind of resign to, hey, I got to be here. I got to kind of survive and, make the most of it. And with regards to the male, you're always looking for something to like that hope. You always want to have something to look forward to. That was, I guess that was more my thing. And I think a lot of guys in there, like always having something to look forward to. So if you have a letter coming, if you have somebody who's consistently writing about whatever the subject, right? You're looking forward to that. That's something to look forward to. So when you get down, you have like, hey, I got this letter maybe coming tomorrow or the next day. And the hope of that gets you to the next day.
Totally. I think that's a great segue into the last poem that we'll share. And particularly, I hope when we share this poem, this gives the audience a sense of what is the importance for our members of having that particular thing to look forward to, but then also an example of the poems that they'll be able to comment on, and that we will mail to our members so they can have a mail to look forward to as well. So I'll invite you to read this last poem by one of our members, Brandon R.
Yes. It's called The Voices of My Ancestors by Brandon R. Don't look at your situation as a failure. Use this moment as a guide to your future. I know you've been through a lot. Trust me, I know it's been a lot. Use this wisdom to break the cycle. You are the best when you're doing what you have to do.
Is there anything about this poem that stands out to you, Woodrow, or anything in the poem that you can relate to?
Yeah, some of those lines in particular with regards to like using that wisdom to break the cycle, like that touches me because I thought that after what I had been through, I'm like, hey, I have to share this with somebody. I have to make sure that, if I could just touch like one young person and give them my story and maybe that would divert them from that path because, that path is something that somebody told me when I was young, but I ignored it, because it's like, they told me, hey, the road you're going down, there's only two outcomes, prison or death. So I was like, at the time, like, that everybody used to say that. It's not like, I didn't hear that before. And I'm sure young people hear it now. And it's such a thing that's so far off and unimaginable that you kind of have no choice but to ignore it. But I want to, I'd like to show them that, hey, okay, that's true. but you can, you know what I'm saying, you can turn it around, you can find another path. You can make a third path where it's the, okay, not prison or death, but, redemption. Like I can stop now without having to go through that. So I
Thank
kind of
you for
got that from
sharing.
that break that cycle part of the poem.
Thank you for sharing. I'll turn things back to Carlos to sort of engage us all in the last part of the conversation.
So thank you, Woodrow. Those definitely the powerful words too, Woodrow, and thank you for emphasizing that importance to male, because a lot of people don't understand, like, how sometimes like that's like our connection to the outside, and it's something that like it is not only desired, but like you said, like we hope for it. And I have a quick question for both of y'all. One is like I'm just curious, like both of y'all have a lot of accomplishment. I know, Woodrow, you just came home not too long ago. So my question is like, what is your feeling like to be out after all this time, that you dedicated your time to something good, and you're out here like putting it back out to the community? What is that feeling like?
For me, you know what I'm saying, I just don't want to, something that Mustafa said, like the miracle of it. Like, I don't want to waste that, you know what I'm saying? Because it's not every day, like, that you get that. And I believe it was a miracle. That's for sure. Because, when I look back at all the experiences, the what could have beens, the different places all of us had been, and the stories, the hard stories we know, like, so that, like, I know that it's a miracle. So I don't want to waste that. I want to, continue to let kind of God order my steps. So I know this was done for a reason. So I just want to make sure that I don't take that for granted, and whatever positive energy I can give out, whatever wisdom I can give out, I want to do that.
Thank you, Woodrow. And Mustafa, my question to you is like something that like similar that Araba asked Woodrow. In your view, how important is receiving mail in prison?
Receiving mail is vital, right? You're thinking about a person who took their time out to write you a letter, and then craft the letter and choose their words wisely, right? And even if they didn't know, they just basically took their time or their busy schedule for work, or dealing with their kids, or dealing with their everyday life. So it's so important, man, that when you get that letter and the CO stopped at your door and he popped your slot, or he popped your door and he stick that piece of mail through the door, feel loved, and you feel like that there's hope for you. And so you immediately read the letter and you analyze it, and then you write back. You might put some oil on it, or you might put a picture in it, or you might put a card, but definitely gonna respond. So it's vital, man, to receive mail in prison.
A lot of people don't know about that all in them letters, man.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something else, right? We're about to go into like the feedback and stuff. Like for both of you, same question. Like, what advice would you give those that are with us today, as far as like what kind of feedback or how to give feedback?
Well, I would say that if you got a loved one that's in prison, whether they are related or whether they're a friend, reach out to them, send a card, send a picture. If text message is available, send a text message. If you got $5, send it. That go a long way, man, because a person in prison always want to know that they got somebody in society that's in their corner. So support those who need your help, even if they're in society, man. We got to support our people.
And what about right now? Like we're about to like go into the poetry feedback. Like how would they? What's the best way to go about giving feedback there?
You could definitely reach out to Free Minds. Put the name of the poem that you had, what was the decision, or whatever. I'm using that for an example, and right back to the individual how this poem impacted when you heard.
Thank you, Mustafa. Woodrow, same question. Like, what kind of advice would you give to somebody to, that's giving feedback right now?
Yeah, like I said, the real emotions you get when you hear, not just sometimes you hear a poem and the whole thing may not affect you, but the message or a single line in the poem, or it gave you some thought. That's a good letter starter. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I read your poem and this is the part of it that touched me, and this is what I got from it. So that's a kind of good starting point of you giving feedback to somebody about the poem, and they can kind of relate to you what they were thinking when they wrote it, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Thank you, Woodrow, for that answer. I'm checking to see if we have any questions. Let me see. This is for us, myself, Mustafa and Woodrow. How did you all get through receiving such long sentences? How do you psychologically survive? How did you do besides learn? What did you do besides learning, reading, and writing? This is a question. Let's start with both of you.
For me, I was just, other than reading and writing, of course, exercise. People think about, like, prisoners, you go through those. Like I said, to me, prison for me was about phases, the different phases of my incarceration. And I, I tell people, like, hey, when you do, that amount of time, everybody kind of, deal with it in their own little way. Everybody got their thing that they do to get through it, however they get through it. I learned that time went by more quickly for me, and I dealt with it better psychologically when I had what I call a program. Like, each day is what I do, and I had I had flexibility in that, because prison can, like, you have lockdowns or whatever. So I'll do this tomorrow, but if there's a lockdown, I'll do that. You know what I mean? And I kind of stuck to that, and that kind of helped me, progress, through each day, through all of the lockdowns, so on and so forth.
Yeah, thank you, Mustafa.
I would say for me, I mean, it was a variety of things: reading, writing, exercise, religion, a job, the phone, the email, music, whether it's talking to a staff member or a fellow kid that was in the prison. I did it all. I mean, I would walk the yard, or I go outside when nobody was there. So, put my headphones on and walk the zone out. I would drink a cup of coffee. I would give them the phone and ask questions. And just the fact that you trying to keep your mental state healthy, I would do anything to do that. But I go to mental health services or religious services. I did it all.
Yeah, and I would agree with both of y'all, because it's like what both of you guys said. It's like that's what worked for me. Like Woodrow said, I had a program. I try to stay on it, and we always got to have a plan B, because the unexpected always happens, and behind the walls, and we got to remain positive, keep pushing forward, and keep doing our educational things. So that was my way. And another question, this one's for Woodrow. Like, they want to know, what is the book about? The book that you're working on.
The book is, well, tentatively titled, like, The Phases of My Incarceration, right? And to be honest, the reason that it's probably not, like, all put together and done yet is because the final chapter I want to be when I make parole. That'll be a fitting end to the book. You know what I mean? When I finally get off of parole, as, part of a life sentence, if I can get that shortened to, show the powers that be that, hey, I'm out here and I'm out here to stay, and I'm gonna stay positive. I'm working, I'm a productive member of society. So they need a few years to see that. And once that is done, I can kind of put the final chapter on the book. So if you see a book out there and it's called The Phases of My Incarceration, that's me.
Now we're gonna be looking for it. Ain't that right, everybody? So,
Definitely.
sure.
Definitely.
Look, one last question, and I think this one is interesting as well. I'm gonna read it out just how it's written, because it's a shout out to y'all too. Coming out of incarceration, how did poetry and creative expression help you reintegrate within mainstream society? And it's a shout out to y'all strength, for y'all strength and courage. Y'all are so inspiring. So I had to read that part too. So Woodrow, you can start.
Yeah, like I said, my my interest in reading, you know what I'm saying, is like, because how reading, in particular poetry, connects you to the poet. You know what I mean? And then you can get that just from those few lines. You can kind of get into the head of the poet, right? And the part of it that touches you, right? So when now I hear it, you know what I'm saying? I learned that from being in prison, to be honest, because before I went to prison, I could have read poetry. I don't care who it was, Maya Angelou, whoever it was. It may not have touched me. I've been able to feel it with any depth of feeling the way I can now because of what I went through.
I read poetry before, but it was really religious poetry. My first poet that I actually came in contact with was a peer. His name Pauline Flowers, and he came out with a poetry book. And because he was a friend, I said, you know what, I'm gonna get his book a shot. And so I read it, and man, like, there's so many poems that I can think about right now that send chills through my spine. Because I could relate to what he was saying, right? We in the same place. I know him, and the fact that this came from an individual from where I came from, it was such a blessing.
Thank you, Mustafa. Araba?
So just wanted to make sure that we included our call to action at the end of this conversation. If you're interested in supporting our work, you can hit the donate button on our website, freemindsbookclub.org, which should be in the chat floating around. Every little bit helps. Even just $1 can help cover the cost of printing and mailing the poems that we're going to be responding tonight, with all the responses back to the poet.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely be grateful for that. So now we're going in a little bit, we're about to share this link to go into the mirror, but I just want to make sure like everybody knows how to like maneuver around it, right? So it's just like 5 little things, like small things that you need to know in order to maneuver around it. The first thing is this arrow turning it blue. It just activates for you to pretty much maneuver around it. The main thing is text. You click on the T, bring it over to whatever poem you're trying to comment on, and just start typing. To enlarge it, sometimes like when you log in, it might be a little too small. You could use the mouse or enlarge here, the plus, the minus sign at the bottom left. Here's the undo button in case you want to erase. And don't worry about like just typing on top of each other. We're gonna make sure like we fix it and we send it back to our members like looking real nice, and that's pretty much it. Unless you guys feel like I forgot something, y'all can help me out to let them know. Other than that, the 3 mirror boards, there are 3 mirror boards and each has different poems. So make sure you check all of them out. The first page in the mirror board also has access to the other tables. Mirror works best on a computer or tablet, but if you have like any problems using the link on the mirror board, you could always go into the doc. It's a Google Doc in there that you could go to, you click onto, and you could also use that to comment on the poems. So you will get the link on the chat, and it is here on the first page that you will see the mirror tables as well. If you have any questions or need support, you could call our staff until 8:30 p.m. The number is on the Google Doc as well. And just want to say thank everybody for coming. Araba?
Yes, just joining Carlos and thanking everyone for coming. Thank you so much to our guests, Mustafa and Woodrow, for sharing their perspective and their experiences. Please go ahead and click the link in the chat to Miro to continue with the next part of Write Night, or to the Google Docs that'll lead you to the same list of poems. Enjoy the poems, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Write Night in April. We'll be closing this Zoom momentarily, so go ahead and click the link in the chat if you haven't already to begin reading and responding to the poems, because we'll disappear in a second. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Night, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Araba.